Alright, hi guys, Jason here again, and this is test video 2 of my new series that I've called The Idiot's Guide to. So, as I mentioned in the previous test video, which is now on my YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/31tangovictor, um, I'm gonna be uploading a series of test videos on my YouTube channel just to, I guess, fine tune the kind of videos I'll be making for my channel, and I guess settle on a format that I will do continuing forward. So basically, last week, or sorry, not last week, the previous video, I gave you guys a very brief summary on what is Brexit. Today, we'll probably continue to the political side and talk about um, Philippine politics, specifically the current president, Rodrigo Duterte. As you probably figured out, I am a Filipino. Um, if not, then don't be astounded. I'm pretty used to the fact that not everyone who sees me or has known me can pick out that I am a Filo, simply because I am a fairly big guy. So, whatever. Anyway, essentially, I've been a resident here in the Great Southern Land for around about 13 years, but I still follow, Philippine politics. I wouldn't call it on a day-by-day basis, but I follow it, fairly frequently enough by reading the newspaper or watching the news. And as you may not know, there was an election held in early May this year for the presidency. Because of the Constitution, any president that's elected is only elected for a six year term, and they can't run again. Due to the excesses of the Marcos regime. So, anyway, candidates for that election happen to be Mar Rojas, who is basically from Noynoy Aquino's block, Jajamar Binay, who is from the official opposition, if you call it that way, and Miriam Defensor Santiago, who is basically what I'd call, a fairly feisty but smart senator. Um, and Rodrigo Duterte, who is basically, for lack of a better term, the anti-establishment candidate. The election campaign itself's been running since September last year, and Duterte initially didn't want to run. He had his reasons. He said that he's too old for it. I mean, he's like 70 years old, so I guess there's some credence to what he's saying. Um, and then somehow he changed his mind at the last minute. That in itself caused a bit of controversy because his candidate at the time, well, the substitute candidate, decided to run for, allegedly, the mayor of, I think it was Pasay City or Manila, whatever it was. And his opponents were like, well, you can't exactly do that. Do that by, what I mean is, put a proxy candidate in and change your mind and suddenly run for the presidency. Anyway, the Commission on Elections basically decided to not do anything about it. And to a certain extent, I did agree with their decision because, even though the bloke that was running in place of Duterte, I think his name was Martin Dino or whatever it was. was a proxy. I mean, if they were to decline Duterte's candidacy, that would have set off a massive shitstorm in the Philippines. And Philippine politics is pretty much a shitstorm at the best of times anyway. I mean, you're talking about personality politics. It's basically, I've got the most money, I look good, I've got the backing of everyone else, and I'm gonna win it. That's pretty much Philippine politics for you, and I guess Philippine elections to that effect. Um, but with Duterte joining the fray, as they say, that pretty much threw the campaign on its head, because initially Binay was going to be massacred by the administration team for his perceived corruption. And what I mean by massacre is they were basically gonna target him in all forms of political advertising, whether that might be what they call the black politics, or even as simple as putting out, nasty political advertisements against him. But Duterte coming in, they basically got forced to, they being the administration, to shift their sights towards Duterte, because he had somehow a groundswell of public support for running, and the administration, who may have assumed would have easily won the election, were now suddenly finding themselves to be the underdog, even though they weren't really the underdog to begin with. They found themselves um in a state of panic, because there was this guy that could challenge them for the presidency and may actually win. So all sorts of things were being thrown against him. Vigilante, the fact that he apparently condoned vigilante squads in Davao, that's one of them. um his unfortunate comments about a Australian nun that was raped and murdered in Davao in the 80s, that was used against him. And pretty much anything else that they could really unearth to use against him, they pretty much did. But the surprising thing about this election was none of it really worked. Take for example the rape joke. It was very unfortunate, but if you actually read between the lines, he wasn't joking about the event. He was joking. He sort of tried to say that whoever did it, was a useless idiot, because that nun, may have continued to serve her purpose for a lot longer. But again, poor choice of words, and even I can't bloody describe it easily without running the risk of offending the YouTube community, who are pretty much well known to be a bit of a soft cock at the best of times. Anyway, yeah. Before I forget, I am playing Euro Truck Simulator 2 again, because I think I'm finding that this game is pretty much the best medium to do these kinds of recordings in, because I'm just leisurely simulating driving a truck without anything much on the sides going on. So I think we may stick to this game to for future recordings. Anyway, back to the Duterte story. Yeah, as I said before, the campaign this time around was surprising, because all the mudslinging that was happening between the administration and Duterte wasn't really swaying the voters, in a sense that if they were hoping the voters to swing back to Rojas, it wasn't really working. And I guess the theory behind it is, well, my theory behind it is, Duterte was pretty much the least worst out of all the options available. I mean, I hate to include Santiago into that sort of statement, but unfortunately, she wasn't really well. She had, she was dealing with cancer at the time, and I think she probably still is. So her campaign never really got off to a half decent start. And Duterte, pretty much being the last one to go to put their hat into the ring, pretty much became the anti-establishment candidate. Um, and Duterte was smart. He basically campaigned on the simple things: reduce criminality, um, the war against drugs. Simple things like that that easily swing voters. Are pretty much guaranteed to make you popular. And he focused on that. Credit to. And I hit the bloody pole. Anyway, um, and credit to him. He did. He ran a very well. Sorry, a very good campaign. Gee, I can't even speak English today. Um, Even the debates. I mean, I didn't watch the debates mainly because I've got no access to them. You know, Living in the Great Southern Land means that you don't have easy access to live things like that back at home. But you find ways. But obviously, can't say them because they're a bit on the gray side. Um, so yeah, election happened on, I think it was the second Monday of May, and as expected, pretty much Duterte won it by a landslide. Well, what I mean by that is, by the time the national election body ended up counting it, and this is where I've got a stupid gripe with the Commission of Elections, but that's I'll talk about that a bit later. He won the vote with, I think it was 16.5 million votes. Rojas was second with around about 9.5, and then from that point on, it pretty much, you know, was irrelevant. Um, and people were surprised that he won it, but at the same time, I think some of the administration camp and I guess some of the sympathizers with the camp, your Commission of Human Rights, all of those bloody groups started worrying because they were like, shit, we actually have got no say in this. The Duterte group or the Duterte camp won it by a landslide, so how do we go about, I guess, mucking it up for him? And it's begun. Facebook is pretty much littered with all the whole things about, oh, what he's doing is illegal. What he's doing is it's against the spirit. You're gonna be scaring foreign investors away. All of those things. To be honest, I think it's a bit of a scaredy do tactic because like it or not, people are actually scared of the bloke. He talks. He talks in that same way that your dad would talk to you. And it'll be like, don't do that, or you'll get you'll get a slap on the wrist. It's basically that kind of language, and based on what he's done in Davao, people are actually scared of him. And you may think, oh, ruling by fear is not democracy. Well, democracy isn't necessarily translated very well in Asian societies. Asian societies are based on, I guess, patriarchal rule. So, the man or the father figure, he has the say in everything. And Duterte is being seen kind of like, the whole country father figure. So anything he say is basically gospel. So if he says to you, um, surrender now, or pretty much live with the fact that I'm going to be dealing with you by way of putting you in a casket, he gets results. I don't necessarily approve um, of what some police have done, by sort of like, shoot to kill and on that kind of stuff. But no one can really argue that it's starting to have an effect. I think it was a few weeks ago, around about 3,000 alleged drug users and pushers surrendered in en masse to the police in Quezon City because they were like, shit, I don't wanna ah I don't wanna die, I don't wanna end up in a casket. So, and this is the only way I'm gonna ensure that I live. Essentially kind of like survival of the fittest. And look, it remains to be seen whether his scary do tactics work. But at the moment, he appears to be delivering on his promise. He's basically revamped emergency services in a sense that he removed the old 117 number, which is like the 000 here, and made it 911. And 911 is, to a Filipino's mind, is a lot easier to remember because it is an American number. And because the Philippines is still strongly tied to the US, anything that is remotely copied from the States, Filipinos will just jump onto it like a kid loves candy, you know. Um, he started tackling on the issue of contractualization, which is basically casual labor. Because in the Philippines, for you to be a casual worker, they can only really hire you for a 6 month period, after which they have to make you either permanent or they have to offer you the same benefits as a permanent employee. So what employees used to do was once the 6 month period hit, they'd basically tell you your contract is finished. Go take a period of leave without pay, and then when we feel like it, we'll hire you again for another 6 month term. And that was essentially, creating a underclass of workers that, may have served for the company for 5 years, but there were basically 5 years worth of 6 month blocks. So, they never had entitlements to sick leave, holidays, guaranteed payments to their old age pension, you know, healthcare benefits, kind of that thing. So, Duterte is basically told the business community, keep abusing it that way, and I'm gonna make sure that you'll not be able to hire any casuals, and you will only be able to hire permanent employees. And the economist side of me thinks that that is a bad thing because businesses aren't going to be able to be flexible in their human resourcing. But you know, that threat is basically a direct um direct correlation to the fact that they were abusing the contractualization laws. So they're basically being told now, if you got anyone who's been there for more than 6 months, you better you better offer them the same benefits as a permanent employee, or we'll pretty much kill your right to hire them. And any casual employees that are pretty much on your watch now are going to be made permanent, like it or not. So that remains to be seen. He's also told the telcos, Smart, PLDT, to basically shape up or face foreign competition. And you know what? It's actually about fucking time that they got scared of it, because to be honest, telcos in the Philippines are just pretty much shit. You got 3G, but for crying out loud, you'd be lucky to see anything like 3G speeds. They all sort of favor SMS, voice calls, and all the stuff, and it just needs a massive revamp. As much as I loathe saying it, bring back Telstra there. Put Telstra there and then watch them squirm. Then they'll know what competition actually means. Because Telstra, as much as they are a monopoly here, well, not a monopoly, but as much as they're pretty much the number one telco here, would actually, uh, I'd actually like to believe that they would force change within the industry over there. Um, and he's planning on doing other things. I think he's planning to um approve new I think a new airport for Manila. Pretty much redesign Manila's public transport system, which isn't really a system to begin with. It's just a shit file of private buses, jeepneys, taxis, Uber, and the whole other things that really need to be fixed. I'd love to be there right now and actually work in that sector. Work in the government to help them figure out what to do with public transport, because I am a public transport worker. I'm not a driver. I work in the management side of it, and I'd like to think that the 6 years that I've spent working with the public transport sector here, would put me into good stead, because surely no other Australian worker that's worked in public transport's been asked to come across there to help out. So I'd love for that opportunity, but hey, I can only dream. Anyway, looks like we're not far away from where we need to deliver this, whatever it is, milk, which is a bit weird because it's in a freaking DHL tanker, but it's a simulator. Not everything has to be real. So yeah. So yeah, as I said before, well, when I started the video, this is gonna be test video 2, and I've checked out test video 1's stats, and I'm pleasantly happy with how it's going. Obviously, for it to become a bit more successful, I'll have to spend time developing a front page for it, marketing the videos and all that kind of stuff. But I'll be doing that when I've actually figured out a proper format for this series. So at this stage, I'm gonna leave it rough. I'm not gonna be editing anything. So yeah, once again, as I mentioned in the previous video, happy to take on your feedback, suggestions, comments, anything that will make it easier to figure out what I'm going to be doing with the format of this series, or anything else that you want me to talk about. I mean, I could easily talk about a few other things, but I'm sure not all of them will be your kind of tea, cup of tea. So yeah, feel free to leave any comments, suggestions, feedback, so long as it's fairly, constructive, things such as, you're an idiot, you don't know anything, or this video is shit. That's not feedback, that's just you being a dickhead. So, yeah, once again, the YouTube channel is youtube.com/31 Tango Victor. Don't ask me why I made up that username, I just did. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time around. Adios.